Well, it's Wednesday, September 6th, and we have a lot to talk about in this tropical update. Of course, what we had was Tropical Storm Lee. Now we have Hurricane Lee. So as we take a look at the Atlantic hurricane season, we're just days away, just 4 days away from the traditional peak of hurricane season. That is on September 10th. So it seems only appropriate that we have something to talk about in really two areas, but Lee is the big concern. It is now a hurricane in the Atlantic, and it is expected to become a major Category 4 hurricane, and it could possibly become a Category 5 as it passes just north of the Lesser Antilles in Puerto Rico. And it will move to the northwest and take a run at the East Coast. Now, the big question is, will we feel some significant impacts or just minor impacts, such as high threat of rip currents and rough surf up and down the eastern seaboard? That pretty much is a given. We are going to see that no matter what course the storm takes, and that could be big issues all the way from Florida to Maine. But whether we have a more direct impact certainly remains to be seen. Well, here's the current position of Lee. It's still about 1,100 miles east of the Lesser Antilles, and in that position, based on average tropical cyclone speeds or hurricane speeds or whatever you want to call them, they're all cyclones technically, that puts it about 8 to 10 days away from any kind of impact along the United States. And if it's a slower system, certainly it would take even longer than that. So it is on our radar. It is not an immediate threat. It is still more than a week away, and a lot of things can change between now and next week that would impact the forecast intensity and the track of Hurricane Lee. So here's Lee spinning around. It's gotten better organized as we have gone through the day today. There is one other wave out here that is coming off the coast of Africa. It's south and east of the Cabo Verde Islands. Has about a 60% chance of development, but everything indicates this is going to move off into the North Atlantic, so it's not a concern to us. But here is Lee again working its way. It was a tropical storm. Now it is a Category 1 hurricane. And I put on the enhanced satellite because we can see some of the structure of the storm just a little bit better. We can see those flare-ups of thunderstorms, the pulsing of the storm, indicating that intensification as these storms start to wrap around that center of circulation, indicating that we now have a hurricane, and it'll likely again strengthen into a major hurricane. As a matter of fact, if you watch tomorrow's update, we'll likely see the formation of an eye really starting to show up on the satellite as well. Again, Lee is over some very, very warm waters. These darker reds indicating temperatures of over 85 degrees. And that's what we see here in the path of the storm, 85-degree water temperatures here through parts of the Atlantic. And this is very, very warm, record warmth, as a matter of fact, for this part of the Atlantic Ocean. So that's why we call for that rapid intensification. There's a few other plots there that you can see along the forecast path of the storm. And that's why we're calling for that rapid intensification. You might notice this little area where it's not quite as dark red here. That is some of the wake from our past storms, Idalia and Franklin. They sort of churned up the Atlantic, upwelled some of the cooler waters from a little deeper down, and it can take a while, a couple of weeks, sometimes up to a month for that to start to equalize out. That might have some minor impacts into the forecast strength of the storm if it passes over those areas. But again, that would be a minimal impact at best. So we'll get back to Lee again, a well-organized Category 1 storm with winds of 75 miles per hour. And it's moving to the west-northwest at 14, and it is going to continue to intensify. Tomorrow, 100-mile-per-hour winds. Friday, a major hurricane of Category 3 strength, winds of 125 and likely getting up to a strong Category 4. Now, you have to have winds of 157 to be a Category 5, and it's very possible sometime Saturday into Sunday that we could see that developing. Now, this is the cone of uncertainty. This doesn't show the impacts of the storm because it's already larger than the cone is showing. The cone just shows us where the center of the path of the storm will go, and that could be a little bit farther to the south, a little bit farther to the north. If it takes a more southerly track, that would mean some fringe impacts through Puerto Rico and the Lesser Antilles, and certainly if it takes the more northern or northeastern track, those impacts will be much, much less. They're already going to deal, again, with some gusty winds and the threat of rip currents and the rough surf and possibly, beach erosion and things like that for that area. So we're going to add on the ensemble models. Now, we've talked about this before. We haven't gone into a lot of depth as to what the ensemble models really mean. basically we take a certain model. In this case, we're using the European model. I know some folks in the comments yesterday were asking why we didn't show this. Well, they weren't running the ensembles on the storm yesterday, so that's why we didn't show it. We didn't have them. But this center line here is sort of the average of all the different computer models. So now we don't know exactly the strength of Lee right now. We're just estimating it by looking at the satellite. There may be a buoy or a passing ship that can give us a little bit of information. But until the Hurricane Hunter aircrafts fly into there, get an idea of the strength of the storm, we don't know exactly how strong it is. We just don't. We don't have that kind of technology right now. We don't exactly know where the center of circulation is. We know pretty approximate by looking at the latitude and longitude. But again, we just don't know those things because we don't have that information as of yet. So we start to vary things up. Let's say instead of 75-mile-per-hour winds, it has 80, or it has 70, or 85. So we plug that back into the same computer model and we run the simulation again. And we do that, at least with the European model, 50 different times. You can see some of the numbers. There's the 43rd run, there's the 11th, there's the 6th run or so. And because of those slight differences and the slight differences of the conditions around the system, it gives us a little bit of a different forecast. It's never exactly the same. Now, if they were all in agreement and all clustered here together, that would be a very good sign and make our jobs a lot easier. But of course, we're not seeing that. But most of these forecasts, at least through 2, 3 o'clock on Monday, keep it in that center of the cone. Some a little bit farther to the south, some a little bit farther to the north. But the big question comes after Monday. What happens with the storm? Does it keep going to the west? Does it curve to the north? Does it curve to the northwest? Well, that's what happens. So many questions that will come into play as we head into next week. And this is Sunday, September 17th. So beyond this weekend, next weekend, and you can see the models literally are all over the map. Some of them take it over here towards the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas, like the 22nd run. Some carry it a little bit farther to the east, like the 49th run or the 4th run or the 16th run. That's why there are a lot of questions as to what could happen beyond that 5-day forecast cone. And you can see they're all pretty much in agreement to some extent, and then things really start to spread out. And all the computer models are showing that. And the majority, certainly, keeping this storm off the coast. That includes the American model, some of the specific computer models for hurricanes, but there are some of these outliers. There are some of these runs that keep it a little bit closer to the coastline, and this would still be some impact, certainly for the eastern seaboard. If it was a more westerly run with still a Category 4 storm off the coast, you would certainly feel some impacts. That's where the questions still lie, and we won't have those answers for several more days, likely not until the weekend or early next week. We'll have a much better idea. And one of the big things that will help is tomorrow we are scheduled some of the first Hurricane Hunter aircraft to fly into the storm. That'll give us a much better idea of where the storm is, how strong it is, some of the conditions around it, and that all gets fed into the computer models. And we use things. We use the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. We use ships. We use buoys. We actually use commercial aircraft to feed all that information into the computer models. So once we get more of that information, the computer models will start to come a little bit more in line. But again, we're still talking about something that is 8 to 10 days away from any kind of significant impacts along the eastern seaboard. So of course, we'll keep you updated. We'll have all the latest information throughout the weekend and a much better idea early next week as to what we can expect from Hurricane Lee.